get started with is this is all about specifically about the AI chain project, so Mac AI chain. There's already a MuleSoft GitHub repository for this that's controlled by MuleSoft, and this is open to everyone to go and look. And you can see all the repositories related to the Mac project. So there's the inference connector, there's some example apps, there's the Agentforce one, there's the web crawler, there's the vectors connector, and many, many more. So this is the home of the current Mac project. What we are trying to do to try and foster this, Ryan's favorite, the Whisper connector, is try to foster a community around this and really try and build an open source community around this project and try and get more and more contributions to drive this forward. So we have partnered with MuleSoft Forge. So this was currently run by George Jeffcock from MuleSoft, and it's basically a home. So just to give you a view of this one, as in his blurb, he wants to create a single vibrant space where all MuleSoft assets are crafted by our community, lives and thrives. So the plan is that we have forked. We've started with just a couple to start with, but if there's any specific connectors you want to work on, just let me know and I'll start forking them over sooner rather than later. But for example, the most popular one, Mule Inference Connector. The one allows us to talk to various different LLMs. This is by far the most popular connector. We forked it over to MuleSoft Forge, and the vision is that the community will work off this fork to start with. So not directly with the MuleSoft AI chain one, but work in this open source space. And then later we'll work out how to get these contributions back into the main project. Aravind, got a question?
Do you already have that forked instance, or whatever we are setting up, for the community? You already have that GitHub location up and running?
Yeah, so this MuleSoft Forge one. So I've got everybody's emails from this invite, so I will send out a document with everything I'm talking about today later. And I will have the links to all these different repositories. And I'll put up a blog post or some sort of post somewhere as well that everybody can access. But yeah, so this will be the new home.
Yeah, for that, you can put a blog post too, but I think what would be very valuable for the community is that content of that post, the instructions, as we develop it, we're going to put them on the MuleSoft Forge site. And after Ryan's, I'm going to present something about the website.
Yeah. Cool. So you use MuleSoft Forge as your starting place, basically, and find the Mac connectors that you want to contribute to. If you've got an idea for a new connector, if that's part of your contribution, then you would create that yourself, and we would work out how to transfer that over to MuleSoft Forge later. That's just GitHub transferring the rights of the repository. But say you want to contribute to the Mule Inference Connector. So at the moment, when you fork a repository, you don't get the issues from the original project. We can start creating them here. But if you go to the original MuleSoft one, if you wanted ideas of some of the issues that people are currently experiencing or features they would like to see, or any of these you'd like to pick up, then you can look through them, see what it is. And if you wanted to develop that, then the idea would be that you would do it off of the MuleSoft Forge version. So I don't know how familiar everybody is with connector development already and just Java and Git and stuff like that, but I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of how to get started. And like I said, there'll probably be a lot more in-depth questions, so feel free to ping me after this.
Yeah, and for beginners versus maintainers, there's a step where you again fork. So
yes, exactly. I'm going to go through that now. Yeah. But the first thing to do, if you're not familiar with connector development, before even getting started with forking the connector, because the open source connectors for Mac project, for example, are quite beefy. There's a lot going on in them, lots of different classes, lots of different connectors and connections, and various different types of things. So the first thing to do, if you're not familiar with connector development already, is go through the getting started with the Mule SDK for Java. Documentation's pretty good, but there's also loads of good blogs out there. There's a study class from Ryan that he did a couple of weeks ago on Integration Quest as well, which is good to get started. He walks through creating an OpenAI connector. So that's a good place to start. But just, let's say you're ready to start committing something to this project. You've got an idea, you've got a bug fix. The first thing we're going to do is go to MuleSoft Forge and the connector you want. And we are going to create a fork. Where's the fork button gone? So we're going to create a fork. I need to go and delete mine because I have one already, just to show you. Let's go to my profile. No, I want my fork of it. Where's my repos gone? This one, let's delete this. Okay. Security, one sec. GitHub is not working for me.
One question, Ryan. So is we need to use always latest version of Java and Maven?
Yeah, I'll get to that shortly now. But yeah, Java 17 is what you'll need.
Because if you look at Mule runtime previous versions, if you want to support, then we may need to support Java 11 as well, right?
Yeah, specifically these connectors, most of them, they only support Java 17. They're not. But yeah, I'll show you that now.
Okay, thank you.
So create your fork into your own personal GitHub. You can leave everything else blank, but uncheck the copy the master branch only, and I'll get to why now. And then create fork. While that's happening, yeah, so if you go through the standard README on the GitHub page for either of the forks, it's got some basic instructions on here already. And yeah, it says the supported version of the Java SDK is Java 17. Has to be done with Java 17, and the minimum Mule runtime version is 494. So those are the basics. And if you go through the contribution guide, if you click on contributing, how to contribute, it takes you to the Mac project website. This is still a really good resource. It's got loads of tutorials on how the connectors work, how to install them, various other things, and it's got this how to contribute section. Very similar steps to where I'll be performing here. So clone your fork, but you're cloning it from the MuleSoft Forge one. I'll get to that in a second, but what I wanted to show was, it says it on this page somewhere. It says, ensure that the base fork and the base branch is developed. So all the work you'll be doing, you'll create a branch from the develop branch, not the master one. So that's why it's important to make sure you fork every branch, not just master. Okay, so now I've got that forked. I'm just going to delete my old version. So I've got a clean workspace on my machine. And then depending on how you use Git, whether you use GitHub Desktop, for example, you could open it in GitHub Desktop, or if you're using command line or some other Git client. The code, and I'm just going to use command line. I'm just going to git clone this into my workspace. There we go. I've got the Mule Inference connector there. And then the next step is to, like it said, he wanted to use the develop branch. So let's check out the develop branch. Maybe I'll go into repository first. Okay, so now we're on the develop branch. And then the next step is to create a feature branch. So if you're working on a particular issue, so let's pretend I want to fix a really simple issue, like a documentation issue. The connector in Studio is showing a typo. So I'm just going to create a new branch off of develop. Let's call it a feature, and then typo fix, something descriptive. And there we go. So now I'm ready to start my actual development. Now this is up to you how you develop Java applications in general. I prefer to use VS Code or Cursor or something like that, but you can also use, JetBrains or even Eclipse. I wouldn't advise using Anypoint Studio. I think that's got a lot of issues when you try developing connectors or Java projects inside there. I think it breaks a lot of Studio-related things if you import the Java modules needed to build Java projects. But yeah, question?
But for this, this is not as much of a Mac thing. This is more of a MuleSoft Forge thing, but we are still targeting Studio as our primary host for the connector code. So you don't need to use Studio you shouldn't use Studio, like Ryan said, to build your connector. Yeah. But even if you're an Anypoint code builder normally, we need to support 2 versions back on Anypoint Studio. So for testing your connector, you're going to want to have 2 versions back. So I have 2 different Anypoint Studios installed on my machine for testing. Yeah,
and I'm going to show that now as well, because development of the connector itself, I prefer not to use Studio, or you shouldn't. But actual testing of it, I think Studio is actually the best option for manually testing the connector. So let's make a change. So let's do what should we do? Let's find the Azure Open API one, maybe. So Azure, one of the LLMs that support is Azure Open AI. And this is the connection provider. If you're familiar with connector development, you'll know what these specific classes mean, connection provider versus connector. If not, then like I said, that SDK documentation is the best place to look to start with. It goes through all these different classes in detail. But for example, here, we've got a parameter for the connector, which will be on the connection in the global config. It will be under the advanced tab, and it's called user. So let me pretend there's a typo in here, and this should say username. So I'm going to fix my typo. And then next thing to do is actually just test that my connector works. And if you go back to the connectors page, it's got the steps on there for actually building the connector. So if you go to the build and install, which will take you to, what is it on the Mac website, you can go through all the options here. And if you look down, it's got the Git cloning steps that we've done. It's got steps here for how to build for different Java versions. I'm not actually sure why 11's on here. 17 is the minimum, but
well, we'll be talking about documentation contributions after this.
Yeah, Arvind, question?
So I tried running these connectors from my local, try to get them, and then I've been getting a lot of errors, connectors, meaning maybe I'm not doing something right. Ryan, maybe I'll try to connect with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, connect with me through Slack or email, and we can have a look into it.
Sure. Thank you very
hopefully
much.
you might pick up something from this now. So hopefully this will work. So
at least show me getting one connector right. Then I'll pick it up. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the inference one. So we'll show that now. So step 1. We'll start with step 1. It wants you to export some Maven options. So So that. Wrong. Close up, Harry. And then we're going to install this in our local Maven repository. So once this is installed, this will be a local Maven dependency that we can actually import into a MuleSoft project. Let that run.
So in order for you to get Maven to run there, was that automatically included with your IDE, or did you have to install Maven locally?
Yeah, so I highly recommend. So if you're an Anypoint Studio user, you'll probably already have an embedded Maven inside Studio. But I highly recommend, especially if you'll need it for command line, is to install standalone Maven. And the requirements are they're on the site.
Yeah, local Maven is already there, like 3.9.9. Is that sufficient, or should we get
Yeah,
a?
I'll find the page with the specific Maven requirements, but yeah, it has to be in between 3.8 point something and 3.9 point something, basically. You can't go to Maven 4. Nothing in the MuleSoft ecosystem supports Maven 4 yet. So yeah, 3.9 something. The latest 3.9 version is probably the best bet. And that's what I use. So that built successfully. So the first thing to check is your Java version. So I'm using OpenJDK 17, and then your Maven version, I'm using 3.9.6. So I'm on Mac, so my Java I install using SDKman if you use Mac, and I also install Maven via, I think mine is installed by a homebrew. But depending what operating system you're on, there'll be plenty of tutorials on how to add Java to your path and everything, how to add Maven to your path if you're using Windows. But if you're on Mac, it's pretty straightforward. You can just use the package managers to install it all for you. And then another important setting, if you're using Maven, is the Maven settings. So when you use Maven, you have a special directory called M2. So if I just show that in my home directory, I've got an M2. And there's two main things in there. One's a directory called repository. So let me just open it. So I can visually show you. So if you look at, so every Maven, if you're not familiar with Maven, if you look at, where's code gone? So if you look at the POM for every Maven connector, it's got the GAV there, so the group ID, artifact ID, and version. So COM MuleSoft connectors, so that'll be the first part of the.
So you said something the way to install Java. What was that? How did you install it on Mac?
I use SDKman. It's a package manager, and I also use something called JEnv. If like me, you have to support multiple Java versions and switch between them. I use a tool called JEnv. So I can do JEnv shell 17 and then do Java version. And then if I did the same, did 8, I'm going 8 installed on this machine.
JEnv. Okay, JEnv. Okay, got it.
But yeah, this computer hasn't got any other SDKs on it at the minute.
Got it. Understood.
Yeah, so we were showing the Maven repository. So yeah, here we go, connectors, and then there we go, MuleSoft inference connector, and I go 1.20 and 1.20 snapshot. And that's the version we're actually just installed.
Yeah. Now, for here, I have a tip in the video I linked. Snapshots, it will totally work if you are doing many changes that have UI that show up in the user interface in Studio. Snapshot is annoying because you have to shut down Studio and start it every time you want to test. So I've been doing non-snapshot testing versions locally.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll show you a tip to refresh the modules, but it does involve restarting Studio. But if you do want to just use different versions every time you build, just to make it easier, just remember not to commit the version change. Because we will still use semantic version, you know, increasing it as appropriate rather than just accidentally committing some random number that you've got up to if you've done 1 million different tests and you're on version 25,000 or something. But
I have 0.0.287.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so yeah, Java and Maven, and then the other important file in here is settings.xml. I won't open it on a recorded screen because it's got a lot of passwords in there. But yeah, you can set up any repositories or profiles or any credentials that you need to access certain repositories. There is one in there which I'll share separately, which is important for connector development, specifically the inference connector, because of the MUnit libraries that he uses. He needs access to a certain E repository if you're going to run the MUnit test, which I'll get to shortly. So let me go back to Forge and the inference connector. So we've installed that now. And if you look at the Maven command that I ran, the one suggested by the Mac connector, you'll see that it actually skips tests. If you try running it with the tests, it will fail. And I'll show this. I don't know, not all the connectors are like this, but this one specifically, because it needs access to certain LLMs for these tests. So it needs credentials, which aren't just out there in the GitHub repository. But in the test directory, source test, resources, there's this automation credentials properties.example. If you want to run the MUnit tests, copy this file, rename it to get rid of the copy and the .example, because the tests, if I show you, are looking for that file. So if they can't find it, it's going to fail. And obviously, you're going to have to fill it with your own credentials at the moment. We need to discuss and work on how we can streamline this a bit better, maybe. But for example, if you have a known fix or feature for OpenAI, and you probably already have your own credentials for accessing it, you can put them in here to test your module, and then just add this to a git ignore so it doesn't actually get committed. So you don't actually accidentally commit your own credentials. So yeah, so let's actually get this into Studio. So we've installed it into our local Maven repository. I got a basic Mule app here, just created. All it's got is the sockets and the HTTP connector. And if you look at the getting started instructions, it tells you what to do next. So add the dependency using the same Gav. So the group ID, which is incorrect, that one, that's a different project. Let's go to GitHub. Use the one on GitHub. There we go. So this uses the correct group ID that we have in our POM MuleSoft connectors. And it's got a placeholder for version, which we said was 1.2.0 snapshot. So let's add that. And then here you can see the modules is already picked it up and added to my project. If for whatever reason this doesn't happen, you can try closing the project and reopening the project, refreshing, running the build for that project on the command line and stuff like that. Sometimes you run into issues, but most of the time Studio is pretty good, and we'll just add it. And now in my MuleSoft palette, I've got the inference connector. So the change that we made was we updated this parameter name from user to username. So let's take a look. That's worked. Text generation config was the one I edited. It was on the advanced tab. Change the connection provider to Azure OpenAPI. OpenAI, back to advanced. Okay, so it's user. This is because I've installed it previously, and this is the issue that Ryan brought up. So I'll show you a trick, but if you go to your studio and then settings, Anypoint Studio, tooling, there's a modules cache option here. This will erase all resources related to the module. So if you click reset, okay, it'll restart Studio, which can be annoying. So if you want to go the way of just changing the version number, you can. Because Studio caches every module by the GAV, basically. So the group ID, artifact ID, and version. So if you change the version, you will always have the latest changes. Click this to reopen.
I don't know if that's an issue in VS Code.
In Code Builder, no. I haven't personally used Code Builder for connector testing, actually. I've used it to build projects with, 30 connectors, but not in development ones. So yeah, I'll have to try that out, actually. Studio refuses to open. In the meantime, while that's doing that, I'm going to show how to commit these changes back. So there we go, that's opening. You can do this via command line again, but for this part, I'll just show you by a Git client, GitHub desktop. I import my project, just so it's more visual, so I can show you. So yeah, there's my changes. Provider change shows me what I changed. Standard dev best practice update. User field typo. Give it something descriptive. Commit to your feature branch. Now this is on your own fork, and then you can publish it. So this will be on your own fork in GitHub. Right, Studio open. There we go. So let me try that again. There we go. So it says username now. So it's picked up our change. And yeah, if you're doing connector development that doesn't involve UI elements, then there's no need to restart. There's no need to change the version. You might need to run Maven clean install on your projects just so it refreshes the actual imported dependencies. But this is just for UI versions because Studio itself caches a lot of the metadata.
I'm paranoid now. I had issues that I wasn't sure whether it was a cache dependency or not. So even for even for like under connection provider changes or something, or dependencies of an SDK, or I always make a new version or restart Studio. Because I'm not sure what it's caching. I don't. Do you have a way to know?
No, I don't have in-depth knowledge of exactly what, but just from my own testing, if I just update, the actual functionality behind it, system out print line 1 and then change it, and then system out print line 2, I don't need to restart Studio or change the version number, as long as I go to the actual, so not the connector, the actual project where you're testing the connector. If I went there and just run Maven clean, you don't even need to install, just Maven clean compile. That's enough to refresh.
That's a pro tip. I
The
love
module. So yeah, that tends to work well for me anyway, but mileage might vary. So you've made your change, you've committed it back to your own fork. Let's do that. And there we go. So typically when you commit a change to GitHub, it should pick it up. And you can create a pull request. And then this is important. So by default, it's probably going to try and pick master. So switch to develop for the branch. There we go. Now it's able to merge. Give a useful title, a useful description, and then you can go ahead and create the pull request. And then one of the maintainers will review and merge or ask for changes as appropriate.